And we're live, and I don't know why, but I do this. I just, I'm gonna have a little fun puttering around in the basement with some stuff. May as well show it off to anyone that wants to pop in and look or watch. So, I'm streaming to Twitch and to two of my YouTube channels. I'm streaming to the Johnny Gators YouTube channel and also to the Quadcast YouTube channel. Even though I'm not doing anything strictly quad related today, this is still audio related, and generally quad related stuff is of audio related stuff is of interest to people that are interested in quad as well. So hey, if you find this stuff interesting, cool. If not, okay. And this is another one of these, just throw up a webcam on a laptop in the basement, and of course, just as I get ready to go, the furnace fires up, so we got background noise coming and going. But I think the webcam microphone should be good enough to pick up my voice and make this work. So I connected last weekend and showed off a few Fisher MC-4010 receivers that I picked up, and both of them have different problems. One of them has a good power amp, but a bad 8-track board. And I bought the wrong parts list for that board. The other one has a bad channel in the power amp, and plus the 8-track's noisy and hummy as well. So of the two, the first one was probably the better one to focus on, even though it had some cosmetic issues and rust inside, showing signs of being stored someplace moist. But those are both kind of just receivers that look very similar to a receiver I used to have, and the one I used to have is turned up. So if we go back, way back into the history of Johnny Gators audio fascination, of course, way back when, before I could remember things, I was given a little plastic turntable. I did not have the stereotypical common Fisher Price turntable. I did not have one of those. I don't even know what the brand or make of it was, but it was something that had a top on it that looked like a hippie van, which is a bit of a holdover from the 70s, I guess, because this would have been the early 80s when I got this. Although that top part detached and went into storage someplace, so it usually didn't have that. I use it so much, I never put the top back on it. I think I saw one of them turn up on eBay once, and I did not grab at it, because that was before I was buying up every little thing from my past, because that was before I had a basement to clutter it all in, to leave a big mess behind. But and of course, at some point I was given some kind of a standalone turntable with an amp built into it and a pair of external speakers, because I liked the record player so much that family members were like, well here, he'll enjoy this. And I guess it was freed up or available. The main thing I remember about that was at some point the on-off volume knob broke, so that it wouldn't turn on or off, and so my dad was able to fix it up by drilling a hole in the side, putting a silver on-off switch in the side there, wiring it in there so I could turn it on. Some point my dad picked up in the mid-80s a Technics rack component system, and so I got handed down a sound design receiver with turntable and 8-track, thus starting my ability to play 8 tracks. And then at some point my grandparents gave me their Fisher receiver. Now of course I have my eyes out for all these things. Well, most of these things. I'm not really looking for the hippie van turntable. I'm really not looking for the other standalone turntable that I don't even remember what it was. But certainly I'm looking for the sound design. Out of all the receivers I've had, the Fisher seems to be the most common. I've seen these things come and go on eBay all the time. I've never seen the exact same model of the sound design I had. So anyways, after my bad luck with those two MC-4010s, this MC-4050A turned up on eBay, and I threw an offer at it, and the guy took the offer. And I'm not entirely 100% sure what I really want to do with this, because my original plan was to set something up to go under the cabinet in the kitchen. Now, obviously, this turntable ain't going to really go under the cabinet in the kitchen. So if I put this receiver under the cabinet in the kitchen, I have to take the turntable out. And I think when I was starting to look for things, my thought was, oh, if I had one of those, I'd just rip the turntable out and put it under the cabinet. And I think the main reason I was thinking along those lines was because the one that I had, at some point the turntable did go on that, and I did use it without a turntable in there. So I was kind of thinking back to, if I still had that one, there wouldn't be any question of there needing to be room for a turntable, because that was tossed long before the receiver was tossed. But now I have one with a turntable in it, and I'm kind of motivated to work on that and get that working. And then that kind of motivates me to not rip it out. So I don't know. Step one, fix this up. Step two, figure out what I'm going to do with it. I think ideally I'd like to fix it up and actually set it up somewhere as is, and then fix up one of the other ones that don't have a turntable to go in the kitchen. Of course, that means fixing two things up that I don't have the ability to fix up. So anyways, let's bring the camera over and look at it. So as you can see, it's of course this camera is not playing very nice. Let's go ahead and plug it in so we can see it lit up. Well, that's not coming out very good. Part of the problem is I don't have my screen angle to get a good. All right. So, anyways, as you can see, this thing's got all the trimmings for the time period: AM, FM, 8-track with record, with repeat, fast forward, pause. And of course, and it's got a cassette deck up here, and that was a real draw for me. I mean, how I ended up with my grandparents' receiver of this model was I had the sound design, which had turntable and 8-track, and that's primarily what I used. Was I had records I had acquired as a kid. I had 8-tracks that I acquired from my dad, and I played those on the sound design receiver. And one day, the turntable and the sound design receiver developed a whoa. And it was an audible whoa, and I noticed it. And so my dad said, oh, I can fix that. We'll just oil the turntable. And I don't know what he did, but after he did what he did, the turntable wouldn't come up to speed anymore. So I think he just sprayed a bunch of WD-40 under the platter. I would hope he would know better than that, but the effect that it had was the effect I'd expect to have if someone did something that stupid. But he tried to fix my turntable, so I can't give him too much crap for that. Maybe he tried to spray WD-40 into the bearing on the spindle, and some of it leaked its way over to the the idler wheel. I don't know. All I know is that turntable never worked quite correctly again after that. It would need to have been opened up and cleaned up properly. But anyways, so my grandparents had picked up a more modern rack component system and said, well, if you're having problems with the turntable on that, we'll give you our old one. And so I called them up and said, sure, bring it over. And they did. And this was great because up to this point, I mostly listened to records and 8-tracks. I had a few blank cassette tapes that I used on my boombox to record stuff so I could actually listen to stuff on the go. Because you can't take something like this outside and carry it with. Well, you could, but why would you? So back then, I was like, when I only had 8-track and turntable, if I wanted to listen to music on the go, I had to basically use the built-in microphone of my little cassette boom box, hit the record button, hold it up to a speaker, and play the 8-track out the speaker. So I had these awful sounding cassettes I would listen to as a kid. So when my grandparents gave me this, it was great, because then I could take my blank tapes and do a direct dub from 8-track to cassette, and I did a lot of that. Most of the cassettes I listened to, as I picked up a Walkman, I listened to cassettes on the school bus all the time. And generally, most of what I listened to was dubs off of my records on my 8-tracks that I made on the unit exactly like this that I had back then. So having, a 3-in-1 unit like this was really great once I picked that up as a kid. So I was quite thrilled with it and have lots of fond memories of it, and that's why I wanted to pick up another one. It's just, finding one that still works. So this one has the same problem that the one that I had when I was a kid that I tossed out eventually developed. One of the power amplifier channels has blown out. Oddly enough, if I recall correctly, I think the one I had, the left side still worked, the right side went out. This one, the right side works, the left side went out. So if I kept the one that I had as a kid, I could have just sawed each of them in half, duct taped the two halves together, and have a full working. That's how that works, right? That's not how that. Okay, well, anyways, it's too bad because I basically. It's kind of funny because I reached a point as a kid where I had one of these. It wasn't working completely right. It wasn't practical to keep it. I tossed it out. And now here I am. I've come full circle that it's not about practicality. It's about nostalgia. And I go out and I buy something with the exact same problem that needs to be fixed up. And it's like, if only I had just held on to the one I had until I wanted to fix it up. But like I said, by the time I tossed out that one, the turntable was no longer in it. I had pieced it apart at some point and tossed out the pieces. So this gives me a chance to start over with a potential turntable. And I say potential because this turntable's got issues. For starters, it arrived damaged. The person who packed it up did not secure the tone arm when packing it up. He packed it okay. I don't know if it was good packaging or luck that caused the dust cover to not get damaged. Yes, it does still have its dust cover, which is upstairs right now. And that came intact. And I think there was an element of luck to that because the box wasn't damaged. But the arm popped out and swung around widely, and it came off its pivot. Luckily, it didn't actually snap off its pivot. It really just, it lost a screw, and I found the screw in the bottom of the box. So I was actually able to get the tone arm back on here and get it back on its pivot. Of course, the spring is not properly in place, and that's way too much. I took the needle out, and the needle that was in there was busted anyways. But yeah, that's way too much needle pressure. So I'm gonna have to refer to the service manual to figure out how the spring needs to be put in here to get the correct needle pressure. But before I get to that point, I need to figure out how to make the platter turn properly again. Because I don't know if the camera shows this, but this does not turn very easily. And when it does turn, it's turning the whole spindle with it. The spindle's not supposed to turn. So this thing is seized right up. And I took off the clamp, or the clip. I think they're called E-clips or C-clips. But I've, personally, I like the term someone on the internet coined for them. He called the little clips on here Jesus clips. And the reason he called them that is because you get the little screwdriver, you try to loosen it up, it goes ping across the room, and you exclaim, Jesus! So that's, luckily, my clip did not go flying across the room. Anyways, I've had a little fun with this already, because even though I have a bad channel in the power amp, and I have a turntable that's seized up, the line output works perfectly fine. So preamp and components are in great shape. I can play 8 tracks and cassette out the line out, plug that to an auxiliary input on another amplifier, and things work great, which is exactly what I did with the one I had as a kid for a number of years before I tossed it.
And actually, I got to tell you, I wasn't thinking about playing cassettes. I wasn't really excited about having the cassette player in this one, even though it was such a important and functional unit on the one I had as a kid. My nostalgia is more towards the 8 tracks and the records. But having this come, of course, I had to test out the cassette player to test everything out. I went into the basement and grabbed a box of my old cassettes, and I had a lot more fun playing through those on this thing than I was expecting to. So that was a little fun, unexpected trip down memory lane. Anyways, there are many YouTube videos, and by many I mean there's at least 2, on restoring these things, especially when you got a seized up bearing. And I've seen WD-40 and heat be used as methods to loosen these up. Well, I'm fresh out of WD-40, so if I need to, I can run out of the store. I do have this other spray lubricant, but I don't know if this has the same properties as WD-40, and I don't know if that's going to work. But one method I've seen used on these is to take a hot soldering iron and kind of heat the core metal here where the spindle goes in, and get that to transfer the heat to the bearing with its seized up, gummed up oil or grease. And once we get that heated up and loosened up, that should help us be able to release a platter. So if we do anything today, I would like to get this platter off of here, is what I'd like to do, if we get anything done today. Which means that we probably won't get that done today, because rarely do I actually achieve the one goal I set out for myself, no matter how easy I make that goal. So we shall see. Oh, I suppose I should turn that off and unplug that before I start opening things up. There we go. All right, so we're gonna see if we can. Let's play with the camera angle a bit here. All right, so I got the soldering iron resting on the metal here of the spindle that we took out, or the hole where the spindle goes in, and I'm hoping we can, kind of heat up the bearings in there, heat up the greases, melt that stuff, and get this platter to just pop right up out of there. Just pop right up out. Because basically, when it comes to these changers, it's basically take the clip offs, take them apart, clean off all the old lubricant and grease, re-grease, re-lubricate them, put them back together. Maybe sometimes there are rubber parts that have cracked that need to be replaced. But basically that's what it is. It's basically disassemble, clean it, lubricate it, replace any cracked rubber, and you're good to go. Of course, if you got a damaged tone arm, you got to deal with that. Probably also need to make sure that the tone arm is in good shape as far as lubricant, and not this is moving pretty loose and free, which is good. You don't want much resistance here, but probably good measure to review the best methods to make sure that our bearings are lubricated in the tone arm. And also we'll need to track down a stylus. I actually may have a stylus somewhere that fits this cartridge. It's a Pickering. Generally, when I'm doing things for practicality, I take the cartridge out and I put it in an Audio-Technica cartridge, because I have several of those, and the styluses are interchangeable between them. And not to mention that they'll take a 78 stylus, and this does have 78, and I don't know about a Pickering 78 stylus, or if one's readily or easily available. So it would make sense for me to want to swap out this Pickering for an Audio-Technica cartridge. But being that I'm kind of restoring this as nostalgia, I kind of want to keep the original cartridge on this one. So I might just track down a Pickering stylus for this. Like I said, I think I may have one somewhere that fits it, at least to start testing things out. Because one of my turntables I picked up many years ago had a Pickering cartridge on it that I took off, and I think I stored that somewhere with its stylus still in it, and I think I stored it someplace where it wouldn't get damaged, but I had to do a little looking around for that. Anyways, we've heated this up to the point where probably touching that would be bad. So let's see if we have made any progress here. Ah! There we go! Now we can play Frisbee. All right, go along. Go along. Yep. Okay. Yes, I'm filled with lame jokes. So we're now not going to touch anything because that bearing and that spindle has been heated up to like 800 degrees. So we probably don't want to touch that. But we could take a look at the idler wheel and the other parts in here and see what we got. So I'm going to move the camera again, and we'll take a look at what we got here to look at. This gooseneck thing has a tendency to rest in the positions that you don't want it to. But anyways, we kind of got an angle here. So over here is our rubber idler wheel, which looks in good shape. No cracks in it, no flat spots. So I think we're good to basically disassemble this and clean and lubricate and reassemble it. One thing, and I'm going by memory here, I think the one that was in my receiver that I grew up with actually had a metal gear over here that turned things. I'm pretty sure I remember, but then again, I've looked at so many turntables over the years that have this design that I could just be mixing things up. But as you can see, I mean, these machines are very basic. Although the most complicated part of a turntable like this is that underneath this gear, which has this channel here that when it makes a circle moves things, is that underneath you got a whole lot of moving parts that basically, depending on the state of this and the state of this, will go through a cycle of lift up the needle, come back, and either drop it down, shut off, or bring it into 12 or 10 or 7-inch point and drop it down. So that's a lot of moving parts in there to do that. But otherwise, you take that out of the equation, we basically have the wires that connect to the cartridge coming through the tone arm, which then come up here and connect to these two RCA jacks, which just plug into some RCA jacks that are inside of this receiver that are plug into a magnetic photo built-in preamp. So you could easily swap this turntable out for any turntable, but if you're going to connect it to the built-in wires in here, you're going to want a magnetic cartridge. Otherwise, you're going to have some, signal problems. So that's basically how your sound path is, through the tone arm into these connectors here, which just connect to anything that's prepared to take a magnetic cartridge level. And then the other element you need to play a turntable is rotation. And so we got our bearings here on this part that I almost touched, that I've superheated up not too long ago, so I don't know how warm that is. So that makes the platter kind of free moving and rotate nicely. And over here we got the motor, which is basically plugs into AC power, and this will spin up, and has three different sized portions that the idler wheel here can rest on. Because if I move this to the on position, right now the idler wheel is resting on the top one, which will turn at a rotation so that it would rotate the platter at 33 1/3 RPM. And the speed control here just moves it down to different parts on the motor to go to 45, 78, because this is a 3-speed changer. Although I don't know how one would realistically use it as a 3-speed when it comes with an LP stylus and does not have a cartridge that takes a flippable stylus. So I don't know what the intent of this design was, why they continued to put 78 on turntables that came with a single stylus. I know what I did with it. I played 78s with this LP stylus, and you got sound, and I didn't know any better. But that's generally not ideal. It's not good for the stylus. It's not good for the record, and it doesn't sound as good. So I don't know if it was common for them to sell 78 styluses back then that you would interchange to go back and forth, or if people just, well, probably the realistic thing is that people just played 78s with an LP needle on the rare occasion that they did. Because by the 70s, how many people were still pulling out their 78s? I don't know. I wasn't there. But anyways, basically the big problems that this is going to have as far as the platter rotating is bad lubricant. So this clip comes out, this part will lift out, which will let us lift that bearing out. So we can clean that off and re-grease that. We'll take this idler wheel out so that we can clean and touch up the grease on the idler wheel on this post here. We got 3 clips here that are holding the motor in place there. So that'll let us drop that down, take that apart, clean out the old lubricant, re-lubricate that, put that all together. So once we get this all together, we got a nice clean lubricated motor that'll spin up nicely. It'll turn a nice idler wheel that's all lubricated and will spin nicely. And hopefully, and our bearing will let the turntable platter turn nicely, and maybe a little bit of WD-40 on the parts underneath so that the changer will, because I don't know how much we need to do with the changer parts that move underneath, but there's a lot of moving parts there, and if I start taking that apart, that'll never go back together right again. And then, of course, I need to figure out how to properly, since this tone arm came off and I put it back on without putting the spring in the right place, I need to review some documentation to figure out how this spring, I guess it's supposed to wrap around something, because the spring's there, but there's no tension on the spring. So I don't know what I need to do there. And then get a Pickering stylus on there, and that should be good for that. One thing we could do is we can determine if the motor is spinning, because nothing was turning before because of how seized up this platter is, but now we don't have a platter on here. We could at least see if the motor's spinning. So I've already taken this out and disconnected the wires from it. So I'm going to go ahead and come in here, and as you can see, we got a Molex connector, the same thing that hard drives used to use to power them. How funny that the same thing that was powering our hard drives for many, many years is the same connector that's used on all these 70s and older turntables. All right, so we got AC power connected to our turntable here. I'm not going to bother connecting our left-right connectors to this right now because we're not going to be playing anything. All right, we're going to go ahead and plug this back in. And we're going to turn this on. And now we're going to move our turntable into the on position and see if the motor spins up. And yes, it is. It absolutely is spinning. I don't know if I can get this camera in close enough so that you can actually see. Well, I guess if I might have to take my word for it. All right, so we got a working motor. So all in all, we got some good parts to work with here. We got a turntable with a working motor. We got the platter off of it. We got some things to disassemble and clean off the lubricant and put new lubricant on. We got a spring that needs to be adjusted and a tone arm pivot that probably could use a little touch up on the lubrication. And that should be that. But more importantly, we got a blown channel on this thing, and I don't know what to do there. A common go-to is capacitors, but given that I've now 3 out of the 4 of these that I've owned, and I'm counting 4 because I'm counting the one I owned back in the day that I got rid of in the early 2000s, At some point in the 90s, a channel blew on that one. That's a little early for the capacitors to be going. I think a channel blowing out and dying might be a transistor issue. That seems to make sense, that if a transistor's not letting signal through, then I mean, certainly any component not letting the audio signal through would cause a problem. Generally, resistors don't go as often as capacitors. I don't think a capacitor just, I don't know. My suspicion is that somewhere in the power receiver spot we got a bad transistor. And I think I've read online a little test you can do with a multimeter to test transistors. So that's what I'm going to do, and that's probably something that's a little boring to do on camera, because, I mean, as you see, these camera angles aren't that great. But I think I'm going to try to take this thing out of its shell, take a little look at the power amp part of it, and see if I can get some readings off of the transistors and determine if we got a bad transistor. And if that's the case, I might want to buy those in pairs. I'm thinking that when it comes to an amplifier, what you do on one side, you probably want to do on both sides to keep all things even. So yeah, I'm going to see if I can test the transistors on this thing. If I determine we got bad transistor, I'll buy new transistors and try to solder those off and on, and hopefully we can get both sides working on the power amp on this, which would be great, because like I said, we got a working cassette deck, we got a working 8-track deck. All I had to do was put a new belt in there. Those are still easy to buy. And so if we get a good power amp, we got ourselves 8-track and cassette easy. And with a little bit of work, a little bit of time and elbow grease, we'll have a turntable on this too. And wow, will that be fun. Do I have a practical need for this? No. But I'm still excited about it. You know, it's funny because I really still don't know what I want to do with this, except that I know I'm having fun with it. It's kind of like, it's a whole different thing. Back in the day when I had one of these, it was my practical to go to day-to-day use. And then in the early 2000s, as I replaced it with other equipment that was newer and working, you know, I bought a component 8-track deck that also did quad that I could hook up to the line into my modern receiver. So I didn't need this for an 8-track player anymore. I had a Marantz dual cassette component that I could hook up to an auxiliary input on a receiver. So I didn't need this old, like, shoebox style cassette thing anymore. And I had better turntables than what was in here. And so by the early mid-2000s, there was no practical need to keep this. And unfortunately, I didn't have the foresight to think about nostalgia and how much I would think back fondly on the thing. And, you know, once it didn't have a practical purpose, onto the curb it went. But now here I am, all excited to have another one working again. It's like, damn it, if only I kept that one. Then I could actually have the same one. There is actually a slight difference between this one and the one I had growing up. The one I had growing up, the dust cover did not have hinges. This one, the dust cover hinges to it. Actually, although it's a detachable hinge. So it is interesting that at some point, even within the same model, they changed the dust cover design to have a detachable hinge or to not have a detachable hinge. Because the one I had basically just had little plastic resting spots that it would kind of rest in properly, but it was not hinged, it did not clip in. Whereas this one had clips with basically, you know, the pins that would go into the other side of the hinge on the dust cover, so it can hinge up and down. Unfortunately, one of the hinge parts on the back is missing. The other one I just took the screws out for now because it was that actually got a little roughed up in transit. In transit, the I guess the dust cover got nudged a little bit, and so it kind of ripped the screws out a bit, and so there's a bit of splintering wood. Easy fix for that would be to move the existing hinge to the other side, because it still has a screw holes for a hinge but no hinge, and those holes will probably just take the screws nice and tight and be in there, but I'll still only have a one-sided working hinge. The other option is to just not put the hinge on and just let the dust cover rest on there, which, you know, that's fine by me because that's how the one I had used. Anyways, this has been a rambly trip down memory lane and a fun exercise in removing platters with heat. I tell you, just a few minutes with the soldering iron and this popped right off. So that is convenient. This should be cool by now. Oh yeah, that is cool to the touch. I am not burning my fingers touching this. And that thing is a sticky mess, so now I gotta go wash my hands. Sir Mars is in the house. Could you fill in 10 holes with wood putty and then put screws into the wood putty? Yeah, well, I could. I could fill the holes the stripped. Well, the problem is, if I turn this and show you the back, I can show you what's happened here for those that are looking at the camera. You see, this layer of particle board has basically pulled away. And that's what happened, I think, is I think the a little jostling with the dust cover kind of pushed the hinge back, which pulled back this piece of this layer of particle board. So really, a little bit of wood glue might do this portion some good. And then probably with that glued back together, I could probably just screw that hinge back in there. But I still only have half of the hinges. I only have 1 out of 2 hinges for the back part here, and so it would it might be a little awkward to swing up the dust cover. Not to mention, sometimes it's really convenient to just be able to just lift the dust cover and put it off this side. Also, sometimes it's convenient to just swing it up and have it be attached and just swing up out of the way and then swing it down. I don't know. I have a lot of things that need to be fixed up on this. One possibility is that I might just clear some space in the living room of some of the component stuff that I have up there and just set this up on there and maybe not even really deal with the power amp and just take the line out of this to a line in on the home receiver up there, or the home theater up there, and that would give me a turntable 8-track cassette unit all in one that just goes into one of the line inputs on my home theater. Because right now I'm running a woolen sack component 8-track and a ELAC idler wheel turntable, and I don't have a cassette deck up there. So taking out the woolen sack 8-track and running 8-tracks through this Fisher would probably be it's a decent 8-track. So is the woolen sack. They're both good 8-tracks. I haven't tested the record function on this one yet, but also it would give me cassette, and that would not require fixing the power amp as well. Although I do kind of want to fix a power amp, so I'm actually at the point now where my desire to keep the turntable in here and fix that up is strong enough that I'm kind of not all that excited about putting it in the kitchen. Although I still want a decent 8-track in the kitchen. And so that's where I'm kind of like, well, maybe I need to fix up one of the other ones too still. I don't know. Mars writes in, how about just putting a couple of door hinges on there? Well, that... I suppose that's a possibility. Nice big door hinge. Lift up the dust cover. I mean, yeah, basically, I could, in all seriousness, yeah, I could buy a hinge that's the right size and put it on there. Something to think about. But anyways, so that's my new toy. We'll see how far into this I get before I get bored of it and put it on the pile of stuff to abandon. I'll come back to it. No, this one, like I said, if anything, I could just connect this today in the living room and use it for my 8-track. The problem is, like I said, I was having fun getting all nostalgic listening to my cassettes. I didn't have that many cassettes. Or I should say, I don't have that many cassettes anymore. Because because I used to buy pre-recorded cassettes, but they were expensive, pre-recorded cassettes compared to blank tapes. So, I did a lot of buying blank tapes, and I'd record stuff off my parents' records, I'd record stuff off of my records, I'd record stuff off of my 8-track, so that way I could have my records and 8-track on the go. I'd record stuff off the radio. Recording my parents' records allowed me to kind of borrow that stuff. I'd borrow records from the library and record them on the cassette. I do things like that. And those blank cassettes were reused so many times. And at some point, I think I wiped them all, and I still have some of those cassettes, but none of them have anything very nostalgic on them anymore. I think one of the cassettes just has a recurring beeping sound effect that emulates the sound of the Walmart camera display alarm, which I made as a practical joke to hide a tape player in the camera display. Because that alarm was going off so often that I thought it'd be funny to just hide a tape player in there playing the same alarm sound and have the photo lab person hitting the reset button and not being able to figure out why it's not resetting. But which is a little nostalgic, but I'd much rather have some of the stuff I taped off the radio back in the day or the albums that I had dubbed onto these things. So I really I have a handful of pre-recorded. I have some Stevie Wonder, some Motown collections, a few things like that. But I basically have a box of cassettes, and it doesn't take long to go through and listen to them. And I have no desire to start buying and collecting cassettes. Buying and collecting cassettes is not. It's funny. I have the interest of buying and collecting 8-track tapes, which is something from before my time, and I'm buying way beyond anything that I actually owned. So it goes a little beyond nostalgia for that. But then again, I was always fascinated with 8-tracks and trying to collect them. So it's an ongoing collection. Whereas cassettes was never a fun collection for me. It was only a practical means of music listening. So now the only cassettes I'm nostalgic for are the ones that I owned. So I have very little desire to use them. And basically an evening playing through my old cassettes basically just burned through that nostalgia. And now they can kind of go back on the shelf for another few decades. Anyways, let's see what Mars is writing. Mars writes in, well, you have a nice project. What you gonna do with the other Fishers now? Well, like I was thinking, one of the other ones would fit nicely under the cabinet since I don't have a turntable. So I might actually put this one in the living room, fix one of the other ones up, put it in the kitchen. I might do that, and then the other one would be a parts unit. Because the one that stands a better chance of being fixed up is not in as good cosmetic shape as the one that's got a bad channel. So I might fix up the one that has the good power amp, and I might take the shell out of the one that's got the bad power amp and use that to make the one with the good power amp look nicer. Kind of piece that together, put that in the kitchen under the cabinet, keep this one in the living room. I don't know. But then also, I don't know if I could find a Sound Design or a Tenna receiver. I might put one of those in the kitchen instead, so that way I could have 2 nostalgic receivers upstairs in the house. Kayul writes in, what is a Fisher MC-4050A? Well, since you just joined us, let's do a little recap. This right here, as I adjust my camera and have it move every direction but the one I want it to. Oh, hang on. I just need to twist some things. This right here is a Fisher 4050A. It's a great receiver. It's got AM/FM, 8-track with record, cassette, and a turntable with seized up bearings that we've removed the platter to start cleaning that up. And I was going to say something about this. You know, the receiver on this one has the FM receiver has a pretty cool feature on this. A lot of times you think of a receiver as a bunch of static between stations and hearing like shtoomp, shtoomp, shtoomp. But this has a muting feature that you can turn on and off. And basically it automatically mutes any static between stations. And so it's really kind of a bizarre, different experience tuning FM into here, because you just hear a silence in between the stations. None of that between. Of course, if you're trying to get in something weak, you might want to turn off the FM muting to listen through the static for the weak station you're trying to get in. But I mean, it's kind of something, because this FM dial really has a nice momentum to it. I mean, look at I turn this thing and the needle moves almost all the way to the other side on just one momentum, and if I lubricate that, I could probably get that even better. And so it's quite a cool thing to have the FM muting on, have an antenna on that gets in a lot of stations, and instead of hearing a bunch of static as it's just throwing the dial across, you get that boom, 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 boom type of sound. I don't know, neat little random things that I think are cool. Mars writes in, I have an Echo in the kitchen. I have my Echo in the kitchen. Have I said Echo enough times? Well, Mars has his Amazon device in the kitchen, so he's got all the music. Yeah, I have one of those too, but I just use it to watch YouTube. Anyway, so yeah, that's the 4050. That's a nice little project there, and I'll have to. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to sign off for now, and open this thing up and get my multimeter out. And I part of me would love to stream a little more of doing this, but tearing this apart, multimeter, camera angles, it would make this take like 3 times as long to try to do any work on this. So I figured I'd just do a little introduction and talk about it and talk a little bit about the turntable. And certainly I'll have to do some follow-up streams about this unit as we do more with it. Yeah, I'm going to, hopefully today before dinner, I can try to at least see if I can find a bad transistors or tested transistors, do a little research online to see if I could order replacements if I do determine they're bad, and hopefully getting the power amp working on this again is as easy as desoldering and resoldering a few transistors, and there we go. Hopefully I don't need to recap a bunch of stuff on this, because recapping is a pain in the ass, because there's just so many parts that you got to swap out and swap in. Not to mention, the cost. Buying enough capacitors to recap a whole thing, you're paying as much as you paid for the original thing. So yeah, this is a cool little unit, and hopefully it'll bring me a little bit of fun in my home theater. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll, like I said, I'll have to post a little update. Heck, maybe even tomorrow I might even throw in. Well, tomorrow I'll be doing the Dune and Johnny show over on 5-Hit Dune's Twitch channel. So that's twitch.tv/5HitDune, which 5-Hit Dune's going to be doing his music show tonight, 9 to 1 p.m. Eastern, I think. Is it at 9 it starts? Or 9 to 12? Or I don't... I go to twitch.tv/5HitDune. He'll be on tonight. And then tomorrow, 6 to 8 Eastern, me and him will both be on that channel doing the Dune and Johnny show. And I'm sure I'll have a chance to talk about this a little bit. And we'll find out if Dune's still hooked up to a heart monitor or not, and how much I can push his buttons without killing him. So, I kid. I'm trying not to push his buttons these days, but I think he might not have me muted on Twitter, so I may have pushed a few buttons. But it's okay. It's okay, because I like the map that showed the average gene color by state. So maybe, hopefully that... and I did that in response to him liking something I didn't like. Let's see. Mars writes in, have fun, Gators, don't die. Oh, that reminds me. I had a receiver that I was trying to take the turntable out of. And as you saw, the turntable is powered by AC power on the motor with a Molex connector. And the first time I tried to take a turntable out of a receiver, I didn't notice that it was a Molex connector that you could just pull right out. So I grabbed a pair of wire cutters, and I'm like, well, because I think that was my Columbia Masterwork quadraphonic receiver that had a dead turntable from the start, that the motor was shot, nothing would spin up. And so I basically was like, well, let's take this out of here, and then I'll have a flat surface I can put things down on top of it. Because someone had given me a linear tracking turntable component that I was using, and so I just fed that into to an auxiliary input or something. And so I got the wire snippers, and I'm like, well, I'm just going to cut the wire going to the turntable so I could take the turntable out of here. And the thing is that the receiver was still plugged in. And so when the receiver's plugged in, it's just passing the AC power through the wires onto the Molex connector, and the turntable has AC power coming in, whether the receiver's on or off. I think it did. So I think you could actually no. Well, I don't know, because this receiver's not getting AC power to the motor until I turn on the receiver. So I don't know if I just had the receiver turned on, or if this particular receiver still passed AC power through that wire, whether or not and didn't go through the power switch. All I know is that when I cut those wires, I had a really loud and big spark that came out from the wire cutters, because I basically was cutting 2 live AC wires with metal snips, which had rubber handles, so I did not get shocked. But that was quite a scary, shocking. It wasn't shocking. It was certainly nerve-wracking. Made me do quite a jump back, and I was like, did I just nearly kill myself? Could that have killed me? And so that's when I learned not to cut live wires. Mars writes in, I'm telling Sparky. Okay, we might have to recap that story tomorrow on the Dune and Johnny show, or Monday on my show on the Johnny Gators Twitch channel. So anyways, thank you everyone for tuning in, and keep an eye out for updates, and you all have a great rest of your weekend.